Hi, this is Kathy Magnuson from Wildwood Learning, coming to you directly from my laundry room. Yes, this is where my office is in our house. I live up in northwestern Minnesota in an old farmhouse, and my office is in the laundry room. So I'm so happy that you're here today to join me for a topic that I'm really passionate about: adverse childhood experiences. So I want you to think about a child that I'm going to describe to you. He's a young teenage boy. He gets overly excited when others don't follow the rules. He thinks a little bit in the black and white area. There's not a lot of gray in his thinking. And so when he gets into Phi Ed class, it and he sees other people who aren't following the rules, he gets very agitated. However, he can't recognize this in himself. And so he gets more and more agitated to the point where he strikes out at another classmate. This may result in a detention, an out of school suspension, in school suspension, or some other punishment. Yet he doesn't really realize what's happening within himself. You might look at this kid and look at his behavior and go, my gosh, what's wrong with you? But really, I'm asking you to reframe it and look at this young man and say, what's happened to you? That's what adverse childhood experiences and long-term trauma and effects can have on a child. Adverse childhood experiences are both prevalent and they are preventable. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the research for adverse childhood experiences. I'm going to call them ACEs because that's what it spells. And talk a little bit about the long-term effects, and then also that there's hope. So adverse childhood experiences come from a research project that was done in California. It was between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. This was in the mid-1990s. They researched or surveyed over 17,000 people. These people were mainly white, middle class, college educated, and they had 3 different categories. There were 10 questions. There were a lot more questions, but there were 10 questions that they really focused on that were in abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction that happened between the ages of 0 and 18. If you want to see what they surveyed in the questions, go ahead, Google it, ACEs research survey, and you will find the questions. And I will also put some links down here in the show notes so that you can see and go there and do a little bit more exploring on yourself. But after surveying these 17,000 people, they found that 2/3 of the people had an adverse childhood experience that happened in their life. And that when somebody had at least one ACE, there was an 87% chance that they had 2, 3, 4, or more of these ACEs. This had some long-term health impacts, because then they also surveyed their health and they looked at their health records, and what they found is that as the number of ACEs increased, so did the health concerns. So people with 4 or more ACEs had a tremendous amount of higher chance of having lung cancer, or smoking, or 4 or more ACEs, substance abuse, or obesity, or depression. So all of these, what happened in their childhood, the trauma that happened in their childhood, had a long-term impact on their health. That was huge. And these are mainly white middle-class Americans. And if you think of all the other traumas that were not included in that survey or they didn't use, then there's other traumas such as racial, cultural, bullying. So many more traumas that have happened in childhood that have been added now in recent studies as determiners. So the long-term effects were there. And of course, this is huge for the health community, but it's also huge for educators and the education community because they did this lifelong effects of ACEs and toxic stress study. It was published in the American Academics of Pediatrics in January of 2012. You can look up this study. But what it talks about is how this toxic stress that's caused by these adverse childhood experiences can then be secreting what's called cortisol. So cortisol is the hormone that is secreted in our brain, and we have that happen. And that's okay when it's for short periods of time. And when we have other adults in our life that help us to mitigate that stress, it can become tolerable. However, when you have these adverse childhood experiences and then you don't have constant, competent, calm, caring adults in your life, there's nothing there to mitigate or to kind of be a cushion for that toxic stress. And there can be large amounts of cortisol secreted over long periods of time. And this can change the structure of a brain, especially when you're in your childhood. So when these things are happening, this can also have learning complications. So for instance, the young man that I talked about at the very beginning of this video, there can be complications where child becomes hypervigilant, where they become not able to recognize the triggers or easily triggered or become angry and not know why. These things can all happen, and it's because of this amount of cortisol that has been in their brain over longer periods of time. So this has implication for the students that are in our classrooms or in the youth programs that we work with. Just recognizing that there's trauma in children's lives, and that as adults, we can be a person that is there to help. So, ACEs happen. They're preventable, but they happen. However, that's not the destiny of the people who have high ACE scores. And for the children that have high ACE scores, we can help and be healers. We can help children learn individual capabilities such as calming down, social emotional learning skills, how to have positive relationships. And talking about positive relationships, having those positive, caring, competent adults in a child's life can be a huge factor for that child. And then creating communities that thrive. This can build resilience in the children and the people that we work with. And so it's up to us to be there to aid in the healing, to create communities that can thrive. So as you can see, I'm passionate about this. I believe this is something that needs to be talked about. And I just gave several different professional development sessions at a neighboring school district. I'm going to be working in another school district. So I am available to come and talk to your organization, your school, about adverse childhood experiences, about the neurobiology that goes around it, also another part which is called epigenetics, and how we can work together to build resilient communities. So contact me. There's my information here in the show notes below. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel where I'll be talking more about how we can build resilience in ourselves and in the youth that we work with. Because I'm here to spark joy and adventure and learning. And we do that through creating positive learning experiences and learning environments for the students and youth that we work with. So contact me below. And this is Kathy Magnuson from Wildwood Learning saying, go out there, spark some joy.